In a dry, dusty kingdom, two noblemen approached the end of their lives. Lord Arcas called his son and handed him a heavy iron chest. "Inside is all the gold I have earned. Keep it locked, spend it wisely, and you will live a life of comfort." The son opened the chest, saw the glittering coins, and felt like the luckiest man in the world. He spent his days throwing parties, buying foreign silks, and feeling secure behind his mountain of gold. He didn't worry about learning a trade or studying the land because he had the answer in his basement. Lord Elian, however, handed his daughter a small, weathered scroll of parchment. "I have no gold to give you," he said, "but this map shows every hidden spring in the valley, the exact time the mountain winds bring rain, and the deep veins of copper beneath the red hills. It also lists the names of every man I have ever helped, and why they owe me their loyalty." The daughter studied the map day and night. When the Great Drought hit 10 years later, Arcas's son realized his gold couldn't buy water when there was none to be found. He traded his entire chest for a single barrel of grain and died in poverty. Lord Elian's daughter, however, used her map to find water, her knowledge to plant at the right time, and her father's connections to build a trade route. She turned her worthless paper into a kingdom that lasted 7 generations. Gold is a static asset. It can only decrease. A mindset is a dynamic map. It allows you to create gold wherever you stand. Master Vance was a billionaire who lived in a house so grand it had its own name. One day his grandson asked, "Grandpa, how does it feel to own all this? To have the world in your pocket?" Vance took the boy to the garden and pointed at a massive, ancient oak tree. "I don't own that tree," Vance said. "I am just its current gardener. I was here before it reached its peak, and I will be gone while it is still growing. If I think I own it, I will try to cut it for lumber to make a quick profit. But if I know I am its custodian, I will water it so your children can sit in its shade." Vance managed his companies with the same logic. He didn't see himself as a king who could spend the company's wealth on private jets and ego projects. He saw himself as a temporary guardian of a resource that belonged to the future. He focused on multi-generational stability rather than quarterly greed. This custodian mindset allowed him to make moves that seemed slow to others but were unstoppable over decades. He avoided high-risk gambles that could destroy the family legacy, even if they promised a quick billion. When you think you own wealth, you become its slave, terrified of losing it. When you realize you are a custodian, you become its master, managing it with the calm, steady hand of a professional. True heirs don't inherit a pile of money. They inherit the responsibility to pass it on in better shape than they found it. There was a famous fisherman named Kai who was the only one in the village who could catch the rare silver fin fish. Every day, his neighbors begged him for a fish to feed their families. Kai's son, Koji, watched his father hand out free fish every evening. "Father," Koji said, "why not just give them your old nets so they can catch their own? You are working too hard for everyone." Kai shook his head. "If I give them my nets, they will tear them on the rocks because they don't know how the current moves. If I give them a net, I've given them a tool. I want to give you something better." Kai spent years taking Koji out to the river, not to pull in the nets but to watch the water. He taught him how the temperature of the air changed the depth of the fish. He taught him how to read the ripples to know if a predator was nearby. He taught him the logic of the catch. One year, a massive flood changed the course of the river entirely. All the old fishing spots were gone. The villagers who had tools were lost. Their nets were useless in the new terrain. But Koji stood on the new bank, watched the water for 10 minutes, and knew exactly where the silver fins had moved. He didn't need his father's old nets. He understood the fish. Education that focuses on what to do is a gift that expires. Education that focuses on why things happen is an heirloom that lives forever. Don't teach your children how to use a specific shovel. Teach them the geology of where the treasure is buried. In a bustling trade hub, there were two young merchants, Silas and Jude. Both started with a small stall and 100 silver coins. Silas was clever and quick. He knew how to cut corners, hide a few bruised apples at the bottom of a barrel, and tweak his scales just enough to gain an extra copper without anyone noticing. He called this being efficient. In the first year, Silas made 3 times more profit than Jude. He lived in a fine house while Jude still slept in the back of his shop. Silas felt he had won the game of life by being smarter than the rules. Jude, however, was obsessed with a boring habit: absolute reliability. If he promised a delivery at noon, he was there at 11:55. If a customer overpaid by a single penny, he would walk a mile to return it. He spent his extra time sharpening his tools and organizing his ledgers with surgical precision. For years, Jude's growth was slow and invisible. He was the honest man who everyone liked but no one envied. Then, the great market crash happened. Credit vanished overnight. The banks stopped lending, and the big trading houses closed their doors. Silas, whose clever tricks had quietly eroded his reputation over the years, found himself alone. No one would lend him a single coin because no one trusted his word. Jude's phone, or in those days his door, didn't stop ringing. The biggest supplier in the city came to him and said, "Jude, I have 10 shiploads of grain and no one to sell them to. I know you don't have the cash right now, but I know your word is better than gold. Take the grain, pay me when you can." In 1 month, Jude became the wealthiest man in the province. His character, built through thousands of tiny, useless, honest habits, had turned into a massive line of credit that no bank could match. Character is not a moral luxury, it is the ultimate financial asset. A bad habit is a high-interest debt that your children will eventually have to pay. A good character is a compound interest account that pays out exactly when the rest of the world is going bankrupt. Leo grew up in a family of hard workers. His father was a stonecutter, and his grandfather had been a stonecutter. The family philosophy was simple: sell your time, sweat for your bread, and never trust a man who doesn't have calluses on his hands. Leo was proud of his strength. He worked 12 hours a day swinging a hammer, and he looked down on the lazy architects who sat in the shade with their drawings. He believed that the only way to earn more was to swing the hammer faster or work 14 hours instead of 12. He was trapped under a glass ceiling made of his own muscles. One day, Leo injured his shoulder. He couldn't swing the hammer for a month. Terrified of starving, he sat on a bench and watched the quarry. He saw 30 other stonecutters like him, all working in isolation, all struggling with the same inefficient transport system. He realized that while they were all working hard, the owner of the quarry was the only one getting rich because the owner didn't sell his time. He managed the resource. Leo spent his recovery time not resting, but talking. He talked to the wagon drivers, the tool sharpeners, and the buyers in the city. He realized that the buyers wanted a specific type of polished stone that the quarry wasn't providing. Leo didn't go back to the hammer. Instead, he made a deal with the wagon drivers and 3 of the best stonecutters. "I will find the buyers for the polished stone, you do the work, and the drivers will get a bigger cut for the faster delivery." He became a resource integrator. He was no longer selling his sweat, he was selling a system. His income stopped being tied to his physical energy and started being tied to his vision. His father called him soft, but within a year, Leo had bought the quarry. The poverty trap isn't a lack of money, it's the belief that your only asset is your time. To break the glass ceiling, you must stop looking at the tools in your hands and start looking at the pieces on the board. Real wealth isn't earned by working for the system, it's created by owning the logic that makes the system run. In the city of Valoria, 2 young men turned 21 on the same day. One was the son of a wealthy lottery winner who had spent his life accumulating gold bars and burying them beneath his cellar. The other was the son of a retired diplomat who lived in a modest townhouse but spent every Friday evening hosting simple dinners for scholars, merchants, and engineers. When both fathers passed away, the lottery winner's son inherited 10 heavy iron chests of gold. He felt invincible. The diplomat's son inherited only a small leather book filled with names, addresses, and short notes about their favorite teas or their children's birthdays. A sudden political revolution swept through Valoria. The new government seized all physical assets, including the gold chests buried in the cellar. The lottery winner's son was left on the street with nothing but the clothes on his back. He tried to find work, but no one knew him, and he had never learned how to speak to people of influence. He was a stranger in his own city. Meanwhile, the diplomat's son opened his leather book. He didn't ask for money, he simply knocked on doors and said, "I am the son of the man who once helped you resolve the trade dispute in the north." The doors didn't just open, they swung wide. A merchant gave him a small share in a new shipping venture. An engineer taught him how to read blueprints for free. A scholar introduced him to the new governors. Within 2 years, the diplomat's son was more successful than his father had ever been. He realized that social capital is the only inheritance that cannot be taxed, stolen, or inflated away. Real power isn't the treasure behind the door, it is the invisible ticket that ensures the door is never locked for you. High-level families don't just pass down money, they pass down a web of trust and a vocabulary of respect. If you only leave your children cash, you leave them vulnerable. If you leave them a reputation and a network, you leave them a kingdom that can be rebuilt from any ruin. There was once a dynasty of steel magnates who lost everything in a great war. Their factories were bombed, their patents were seized, and the family was exiled to a small, cold island where they had to work as common laborers in a fish cannery. The youngest grandson, Victor, sat in the mud one evening, crying over a bowl of thin soup. "We are nothing now," he sobbed. "The legacy is dead. We are just peasants with famous names." His grandfather, a man who had once commanded 10,000 workers, didn't look sad. He was busy sharpening a piece of scrap metal against a stone. "Victor," the old man said, his voice like grinding gravel. "They took the buildings, the machines, and the bank accounts. But they couldn't reach into my skull and take the logic. They couldn't take the way I look at a problem and break it into pieces. They couldn't take the fact that I don't believe in losing. I only believe in recalculating." The grandfather spent his nights teaching Victor how to negotiate with the cannery foreman, how to spot inefficiencies in the packing line, and how to stay calm when others were panicking. He didn't talk about the good old days, he talked about the next big move. 10 years later, the war ended. The family returned to the ruins of their city. While other former aristocrats spent their time begging for government handouts and complaining about their lost status, Victor and his grandfather were already clearing rubble. They used the same resilience logic they practiced in the cannery to secure a small loan, hire 3 workers, and build a single tiny furnace. Because they had the eternal flame of a winner's mindset, they didn't need a head start. They knew that wealth is just a shadow cast by a strong character. If the character remains upright, the shadow will eventually return. The greatest heirloom you can pass down is the refusal to stay down. When everything hits zero, the person who knows how to build from nothing is the only one who is truly unstoppable.